Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Bernie L. Calaway. We'll be discussing his new book, Oracles from Olivet, the eschatological Jesus, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But guys, just so you're aware, if you really want to get the full extent of everything that Bernie has to offer, you can't stop at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, okay? Do yourself a favor. Go directly to his personal website, BernieCalawayBooks.com. That's BernieCalawayBooks.com. There, not only will you be able to find this main book that we're going to be discussing today, Oracles from Olivet, but you're also going to be able to find all the other titles that Bernie has written as well. And guys, listen, he's done quite the work, okay? He has another 9 books in association, okay? 10 books total, and really, one of those books is broken up into 5 volumes, so technically, he has about 15 books there to be chosen and to look into. So do yourself a favor, head directly to his website, see everything that Bernie has orchestrated and comprised together for you, because you surely will not be disappointed, okay? And just so you guys are aware, he was brought to People of Distinction today by some of the best movers in the business, Authors Press Publishing. If you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through Authors Press. You can find them at authorspress.com. The book that we're going to be discussing, okay, listen, all right, right off the bat, obviously, it's a book revolving around religious themes, okay? Right there in the title, we know it's going to revolve around the end of the world, right? The second coming of Jesus. And listen, Bernie is going to be able to go into all the nuances about his book much better than I ever could, okay? But I'm so excited. For me personally, you guys know this, I've always been a person that I don't consider myself religious, I consider myself spiritual. Okay, so I do believe in a higher force that way. And I wasn't raised in a very religious way, but it always intrigues me. It always has interested me that way. And listen, Bernie has written a lot about this, and he is definitely the expert when it comes to this particular genre. So without further ado, we have him here on the line with us. Bernie, first and foremost, man, thank you so much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction. How are you today?
Hi, Benji. It's good to be with you again. Wonderful to talk to you.
Likewise. Well, listen, Bernie, we are very excited to have you here on the line. And listen, before we jump into the title, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born on a farm in Texas. We raised cotton. I didn't enjoy a single day of it, so as soon as I got a chance, I went on to college, moved on to seminary, and pastored for a couple of years, and then moved into the Navy. I was a Navy chaplain for 28 years, and then retired in 1995. And I would like to sit out on the back porch and watch the squirrels now, and draw a few pictures when I can, and write a few books when I can, and that's my life.
There it is. Well,
I do have a life in a sort of a sense, yes.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for sharing. Secondly, thank you so much for your service. It is greatly appreciated. And lastly, Bernie, let's jump right in, okay? Oracles from Olivet, the eschatological Jesus. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the book is about the discourse or the conversation Jesus had on the Mount of Olives just after he reviewed and toured the temple area in Jerusalem. It was near the time of his crucifixion, so he was at the high point of his life talking to his disciples about a very important message he wanted to convey to them and to us. Namely, he wanted to express some details about his second coming and some other topics that have to do with the end of times or the times leading up to the end of times. And what's recorded in the Gospels, that would be in Matthew 25, in Mark 13, and in Luke 21, we have a pretty solid description of what took place that day, what was said, and how the interaction with the disciples took place, and how it went along, and what they were curious about, and what Jesus wanted to tell them about. It's interesting that theologians call Mark 13 the little apocalypse, because it's just a very brief synopsis of what you might find in books like Daniel or Revelation or some of the other eschatological passages that we come across in the New Testament. For convenience, I followed into the habit of just calling Matthew 25, Mark 13, and Luke 21 as a collection of the little apocalypse. It may not be totally accurate, but it's convenient. What was happening was Jesus was delivering to them, and by them to us, what some people call a sermon, others call it a lecture, other people call it a discourse. Personally, I like to simply call it a conversation, because it is rather informal and it's not totally organized. It's like two or more people sitting around a table or in a comfortable living room, and in this case on top of a mountain, talking about this and that, whatever is interesting to them, and covering what their concerns might be. And he did that, and the conversation bounced back and forth between the men, the disciples, and Jesus himself. And after it was over, it seems that the writers of the Gospel decided to append 10 of Jesus' parables that have to do with the end of time. And that makes it even more fulfilling and interesting, because Jesus taught by telling stories, which is a wonderful way to express your ideas, and one of my favorites too. And I adopted that in the book and added 10 parables or fables of my own to kind of illustrate a little bit better about what I was trying to discuss, what was happening, what was being said. I really don't know if Jesus included the parables as he was talking, or if he told them before he started talking, or if he told them after it was over, or if disciples and writers just sort of collected them at the end and attached it. I'm not sure about that. It really doesn't matter, because everything in there is relevant.
You know, thank you so much for sharing, Bernie. And just the topic itself it's really something that has garnished so much attention over years, right? And really in all of my lifetime and all of my experience, right? The coming of the end of days. It's something that a lot of time gets a lot of attention that way. Now, what inspired you to embark upon this journey? And not only what inspired you to write this particular book, but this is not the only book that you've written revolving around this type of genre, right? Revolving around this topic itself. What inspired you to embark upon this creative journey, Bernie?
It was an easy choice, because ever since I was a young boy, I've been interested in the future, what will or might happen in the days to come, especially from a religious or theological standpoint. Even as a young person, that intrigued me. I think you mentioned earlier that you are also intrigued by the subject. So
absolutely.
We're not the only ones. Thousands of other people also, of course, perhaps even the millions, perhaps even all of us on some level wonder about what is in the future, what is going to be the content of my future life, how am I going to live in future days, and what can I expect after my own personal death. Those are topics that are deep and profound, and I don't know anyone who has at least wondered about it or thought about it, or perhaps even investigated what can be known about the future times. So this is something that's been with me for practically all my life. So when it came time with an opportunity to write it out, I had no idea it'd be published. I was just, marking time by doing it for my own interest and my own amazement. So it happened that they were published, and it was a natural thing to happen, and I enjoyed it fully and still enjoy it. Every day I think about it, as most people do, and try to learn all I can, as we all should, about what the Lord said would happen in future days. So an interest there was natural for me, and evidently millions of other people enjoy the same thing. Mm-hmm. So we do have a subject that is of general interest to everyone.
Absolutely. And not only a subject that is of interest to everyone, but what a delight that something that started off just solely as a hobby, right? Or just something that you wanted to embark upon for your own sake ended up making its way to a publishing company and actually was put out there. So now the public can benefit from as well. Now, as we follow up, Bernie, next question that I want to really go into is, as we were discussing in the pre-screening call, we were going over, and this is a big book, right? It has a lot of things that can at some points be challenging for readers to get through, and some of the concepts in which you're discussing can sometimes be a little bit difficult based upon the reader that way. Now, two-part question. What are some of those points that readers may have difficulty with within your book? And also, can you explain that for our listening audience as well, please?
I'm happy to try to do that. If you don't mind, I might just combine your two questions and talk about them as a general topic for a moment or two.
Yes, please.
You ask about problems, and there are some that have been a bit troublesome as far as interpretation from ages past right up to the present time. And there are maybe two or three of them, and let's start with what we'll call problem number one, and that is, as Jesus was talking in his conversation, he often referred to actually two endings in history. Don't be alarmed by that. What he was talking about was in direct response to the questions his disciples were asking, particularly James and John, and perhaps Andrew. They were interested in the destruction of Jerusalem because Jesus had told them that that fabulous Jerusalem temple they had just visited was a magnificent structure. It was a profound architectural achievement for the time, modified, built up by King Herod, and it was a wonder of the world, actually. And they had just been marveling about how that wonderful building was constructed and how it was laid out and how it was furnished. But Jesus was decidedly underwhelmed about it. He didn't seem that interested. He said, the day is coming when this temple that you're admiring so much will be destroyed. There won't be one stone left on top of another stone. And this alarmed and frightened and disturbed the disciples because Jewish religion at that time revolved around the temple. And these disciples were good Jews, of course, and they were vitally interested in what was going to happen to their place of worship. And Jesus talked about that as something of an ending. In fact, the city of Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. But in addition to that, Jesus went further into the future, of how far we are not to know, when he got to the end of time itself, when he himself would return to earth and establish his kingdom in the world. So it happens at time, it's not really clear about whether Jesus is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem or if he's talking about the second coming. They're all kind of mixed together as you would expect in a conversation between several people.
Mm-hmm.
That's problem number one. Problem number two is people sometimes have difficulty understanding or really appreciating what the main purpose of the oracles are all about. Why was Jesus talking this way? Well, of course, he was answering the questions of the disciples, and he was trying to satisfy their curiosity about what was in the future. But I really don't think Jesus was totally interested in talking about the end times as such. What he was trying to do was to warn us and to counsel us and to urge us to redeem the time, because for whatever time it is happening that he will come back, the time before us from now until then is ours. And our lives and our responsibilities and our thoughts are centered on this time that we have. We don't know the end of the age. In fact, Jesus at that time said he himself did not know the time of his second coming, at least in his mortal body, in his incarnation, because that was a secret for the Father only.
Mm-hmm.
That's problem number two, which really isn't much of a problem. Thirdly, this one is really big. This one has caused more controversy than perhaps any of the others. In the course of a discourse, Jesus used the phrase, all these things. And he told the disciples that the time of the end would come when all these things, that is, everything he was talking about, had come to pass, and that it would happen in this generation. He said, this generation will not pass until all these things have come about. Now, what in the world did he mean by this generation? Did he mean the time that the disciples were alive and shortly thereafter? Did he mean our own generation? Did he mean some future generation that's coming along? Well, it's not really clear, except that we have to believe that he was referring to the generation that will be alive when he does come back to earth. And all his signs and all his wonders and all his predictions will be fulfilled, and then the end of the time will come. That bears some discussion, because he said it's like the budding of a fig tree. In the summertime or in springtime, you can see the buds forming on the fig tree, and you know that summer's on its way. But exactly when does a fig tree bloom? Well, it could vary from day to day. So it's not really precise as to the exact time that was predicted for the end. And that's the way it should be. I don't think I'd want to know the day, the exact day of the end. It would worry me to death and frustrate me. So I think Jesus was wise in not being too clear on the exact date, and he warned us not to be trying to do that for ourselves. I hope that answers some of your questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing, Bernie, and just through your explanation, I can definitely see, A, there's a lot of value in posing those questions, and B, I can see where the difficulty would come in terms of that interpretation. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, guys, here again on the line with Bernie L. Calaway. We're discussing his book, Oracles from Olivet, the Eschatological Jesus, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly on his personal website, BernieCallawayBooks.com. Now, as we kind of start to tie things up here, Bernie, because, listen, we have a lot of other titles that you've written as well, and of course, we're not going to go into those in great detail, but we at least want to touch up on them, because, again, an author of your magnitude and your caliber that has written so much, we would definitely be remiss if we didn't bring up your other titles, or at least quickly highlight that for you, okay? So, as we're tying up Oracles from Olivet, last question that I really want to ask is, Is this a book that you would say is specifically for religious readers? Or is this book something that could be open to all walks of belief, right? All walks of life, whether you're religious, spiritual, atheist, doesn't matter. Who is your target audience?
Well, that's an easy question. It's for everyone. I did my very best and tried my very hardest to make it as simple as possible and readable as possible. But that doesn't mean it's not theological and there's not some depth to it, I believe, because there's enough in the subject matter to go as deep and as far as we want to go. But I wanted to be very careful to make it as reader-friendly as possible because I like that kind of writing myself. And it's easier for people to enjoy and understand it if it's done exactly that way. In fact, that's why I included some 10 fables, some of my own parables, in the opening chapters of the book, because I wanted to illustrate as best as possible, not only lecture about the words, but make it interesting and understandable for everyone.
So fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, that is such an important aspect, right? I mean, regardless of what the subject matter is, as an author, I think you always want to make sure that you're writing something that is easy to understand, that is an easy read for your listening audience or for your viewing audience, of course, because ultimately that's going to help you reach more people. That's going to help you reach the masses that way. And I think that lends a lot of credence to yourself as an author by being able to take a concept that is very, very talked about, but also something that, can a lot of times become very dense in the discussions because it is something that is very deep in being able to find the balance of easily interpreting.
Actually, each of my chapters begins once upon a time, and that's an attention getter that's been around forever.
Absolutely.
And that proceeds to tell the story or fable, and from then on, we get a little bit deeper.
Beautiful. Well, listen, Bernie, last question that we're going to ask, and then we're going to tie this up, is what is one central message, one central theme that you really want our listening audience here at People of Distinction to know about your book?
I would like for people to be aware that the opportunity and the prospect of Jesus coming again is very real, and that our times are showing so much stress now. You only have to look out the door to see what's happening in our world. Mm-hmm. And I think Jesus was very wise to tell us, these times have come upon us. We're in somewhat of a difficult situation, and it's going to get worse. And we have to be prepared for these times, but also for the time when the righteous will be victorious and he will reign upon the earth. And even in troubled times like this, that's a comfort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, guys, that is not all, okay? If this wasn't enough, if this hasn't already grabbed your attention, buckle up, okay? Because as I stated when I first started the interview, Bernie has written 10 books in totality, and actually 5 of which is broken into a 5-part volume. So technically those are considered one, but it's really, it's not 10. It's actually more like 15 books in totality that way. Now, Bernie, again, we don't want to take too much away from the main book of the hour, okay? Of course, we were here to thoroughly discuss Oracles from Olivet, the eschatological Jesus, and we did that. Now, again, I really want to make sure that we're giving you the opportunity. We don't necessarily want to go too much into detail with the other books because we don't have enough time to do that, but tell us a little bit about these other books that you've written for our listening audience, please.
Thank you, Benji. I'd be glad to do that. I've actually written 11 books, but only 10 of them are worthwhile, so we don't count the last one. The two, we talked about eschatology all the time in all of the books except a few. One of them in particular is called 101 Fun Fables. and I wrote those in the form of animal fables like Aesop did, and illustrated them myself. And they're in full color, a large book, and it tells the story of the foibles of certain animals who get themselves into situations and out of situations. It's purely entertainment, but it's also a good sermon starter, or it's discussion points for people to enjoy it. And it's even good reading for children at bedtime, so you might enjoy that one. The rest of the books deal in some way with eschatology or apocalypticism at the end of time and that sort of thing.
We're here on the line with Bernie L. Calaway. We just finished discussing his book, Oracles from Olivet, The Eschatological Jesus. He also talked about his other titles, all available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. But again, do yourself a favor, go directly to his personal website, BernieCalawayBooks.com. There, not only will you be able to find each one of these titles, you'll be able to find greater descriptions on all of them, but as well as find more information on Bernie himself. Do yourself a favor. As he stated, listen, this is tough times that we're all facing right now, globally, within our human family, going through this pandemic. And at the end of the day, we're all spending a lot more time at home than we're generally accustomed to. But ultimately, that doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? Get yourself up, get yourself out there, get educated, learn something new, because listen, Bernie has done a wonderful and magnificent job of comprising all of this information here for us. So get out there, do yourself a favor, and pick up everything that he has to offer. Bernie, thank you so much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction. We truly appreciated having you as a guest.
Thank you, Benji. You're very kind, and I enjoyed it very much.